my concern is really what these androgens are also doing in the brain in the long term. Having high noradrenaline signaling in the brain will basically give you a mild version of PTSD in the long term. So my view of it is, you guys didn't mention this, but I would consider HCG an immediate ancillary. We've talked about this last discussion. Steve and I talked about it, but I would always include that in my list. And then,
so let me interject based on the question we had on Signal. I have no fibrosis in my testicles.
Oh yeah. So listen, how do you know? How do you know?
No fibrosis. So it's good. I did the testicular ultrasound and unremarkable. And I asked them specifically, look for fibrosis, cirrhosis, etc. Just put it really under the microscope. I didn't use HCG only once per year, like a pretty hefty dose to see where my testosterone production would be. But I didn't use HCG besides my first cycle where I thought it was beneficial. So that's just anecdotal evidence.
No, but
there's no fibrosis in my testicles.
No, but you mentioned let's mention to the audience. You mentioned last time that you don't have hypogonadism. You don't have smaller testes in the first place, which I think would be. I don't think you can develop scar tissue unless you have those smaller testes in the first place.
Right. Yeah. So right. So I don't lose much. I don't lose any fertility or any noticeable loss of fertility or testicular atrophy on cycle. Unless I run trenbolone, and then of course, but that's been before my marriage.
So one thing that I think HCG maybe has viability in not only that if you obviously if you wanted to play it safe, you would do it for that, but in addition to upregulating steroidogenic acute regulatory protein to make sure that everything is going through steroidogenesis correctly while on cycle to kind of like backfill certain pathways that are downregulated and also like utilize cholesterol properly, which otherwise may be significantly elevated in androgen users. So I don't know, you could like theoretically lower your test-based dose and then make up for that with the disparity of some HCG to make sure all those processes are backfilled, improve your health, improve your, HDL levels probably with less androgen and more HCG seems to be more favorable on HDL and SHBG levels and whatnot. And, yeah, like it might have some viability in that way.
Libido is generally a lot better on HCG, because the neurosteroids are being produced in the adrenal glands. You get much more favorable DHEA, DHA sulfate, pregnenolone sulfate levels. So you don't have to supplement those in. There's like different thoughts here. Study,
specifically, progesterone in the male body is mainly produced in the testes, and once you turn the testes production off, which is not off if you don't have hypogonadism, right? Yeah. So you have to have some hypogonadism, but when you do that, you're now injecting testosterone. You don't have progesterone. Progesterone is extremely important for myelination of axons in the brain. So the disease that is related to low myelination is called ALS, what Stephen Hawking had. So you don't want to be on 10 years with low progesterone. You want to always limit dysfunction in the body to as small a place as possible.
Like it almost seems easier to me to implement HCG than to try and worry about manually supplementing every single thing that you otherwise wouldn't get. And it's an endogenous process too. And you don't have to worry about how it's regulated because your body is going to, pending you don't over abuse the HCG, you will have a regulated process in all of the different areas of the steroidogenesis cascade rather than hitting a fuck ton of DHEA, it all getting sulfated, a fuck ton of pregnenolone, it all getting sulfated and not going down the way you want it to go and all the stuff like that. So I think that's definitely a strong argument for you potentially every test base having a bit of HCG in that test base equation.
So by the way, nobody online has ever discussed this idea of DHEA and pregnenolone all being sulfated. So this is a cool discussion.
No, I mentioned it in the video that, at one point, like some of it will be sulfated through the steroid sulfate.
No, I mean, us three are the first people on YouTube who ever talked about it.
Like often when you supplement it, you just see, you don't actually see an improvement in testosterone levels or any of the downstream things that you want to get out of it. You just get DHES that goes through the fucking roof.
Yes, which is useful for cognition.
Once the sulfate levels are at the top of the reference range, you see that free DHEA and free pregnenolone also pretty close to the top of the reference range, and that's where most of the benefits come from. But I think we have to differentiate a little bit here between HCG on a true hormone replacement therapy protocol and HCG on supraphysiologic cycle with, all these androgenic compounds, in which case it usually doesn't work anymore. And you still see testicular atrophy and, reduced semen volume and bottomed out DHEA and pregnenolone levels.
Is that only on like 19 Norzo, or is that even if you were on like 1,000 mgs of test only plus Primo?
The problem, I have a lot of clients, right? And I'm the most extensive with my blood work. I can do it every week if I wanted to, right? I do it every month, basically, in general. So my clients that are running 1,000 milligrams a test, they're not that diligent with their blood work. So I don't have so much data to pull from. And of course, it's all anecdotal evidence anyway. So some guys are running HCG, and even at a conservative dose of like 150 to 200 units, maybe 250 units 3 times a week, after a while they notice it's testicular atrophy, but they don't notice that when they're on, a true cruise, not a true cruise for bodybuilders, 250 milligrams a test, at like 150 tests, 200 tests at maximum, then they don't notice testicular atrophy. So I think at one point, the amount of androgens in your system will simply override HCG. And then a lot of people will say, hey,
estradiol and progesterone. Remember?
Yeah, that also, yes, of course, that also. So
Derek, last time Vigorous Steve and I theorized that the reason that Trenbolone and Deca may be doing this more than other things is because they agonize the progesterone receptor. So we're getting both estradiol high from the testosterone, and then you're getting a little bit of progesterone signaling.
So they inherently activate estrogen receptors on their own, which may have negative feedback too.
But Steve forgot the conclusion of our call, which was that you should use HCG, and the reason why is because the original theory for not using it was because we thought the LH receptor would downregulate. There's no evidence of that. Number one. Number two, you can always judge how much HCG to use by doing it before your cycle, so you know how high your testosterone goes, so it's within a normal range, and then that's not harmful for me. I'll keep it throughout the cycle. It may help a little bit, but at least when I use Trenbolone at high doses and other drugs like real drugs from when I was in Dubai, and I used HCG, I didn't get hypogonadism.
Real drugs?
Yeah, no, I mean like not American drugs, because the American drugs are, you can never trust.
We're talking in the pharmaceutical or the recreational range?
Pharmaceutical, no, I'm talking pharmaceutical. You can get hypogonadism from recreational stuff too. That's
absolutely,
true.
I've seen it. I'm from Holland, man. I've seen a lot.